Hello, listeners, and welcome to the very first episode of This May Be a Bad Idea. This podcast is a conversation on bravery. My intention is that this podcast will be a hopeful reminder that it takes bravery and courage to create the future we want for ourselves, our families, and our communities. With intentionality, we can all face hard things, no matter how big or small, and then make the best choice for ourselves. It will tell the story of everyday people who face what feels like the impossible and still bravely leap into the unknown. I am your host, Nicole Butts. As a homage to the U.S. Agency for International Development, my previous employer and dream job, my first episode will feature USAID staff who are moving bravely forward, many continuing to honor their life's work in service to others and in general to make the world a better place. I'm thrilled to introduce my very first guest, Annie Leverich, coffee mogul, writer, and supermom. For 8 years, Annie worked in her dream job at the U.S. Agency for International Development, leading press teams at the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. She spent those years really watching incredibly dedicated people work tirelessly, ensuring that the world's most vulnerable were seen. Annie worked in service to something bigger than herself. Following the abolishment of USAID, she had a moment, the kind where you think, maybe it's time to actually do that thing that I've been saying I want to do. With that thought, Annie took the brave step into the unknown and started First Light Coffee and First Light Media. And she's not just doing this quietly. She's author of the Sunrise Dispatch, and that can be found on Substack, where she shares the messy, scary, vulnerable things, which is actually what makes her so incredibly brave. And she does it in the most authentic manner. So with that, Annie, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast as my very first guest. Welcome.
Nicole, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yay. So excited, Annie. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Annie Leverich? And how did you become to be this humanitarian turned coffee mogul and supermom?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this. I love the whole thesis of the podcast. I'm very excited to be your first guest. I'm a native Marylander and have lived between Maryland and DC most of my life. And so I always sort of saw public service up close because that was sort of what the DC career path was. So like my dad worked for the Department of Agriculture. So in terms of how I became a, humanitarian and someone who worked in the career I previously had, that was sort of my intro to that was sort of seeing up close what government service looks like. But me personally, I've been married for 11 years to my husband, and we have 2 kids, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we have one on the way. So we are very busy in the family sense. Yeah, and until now, my career has been entirely communications and media focused. So I started my career working with NBC News on the sort of news side of things, working for NBC Nightly News. And then after that, I transitioned to the UN World Food Program. And that's really where I kind of fell in love with the humanitarian work and international development, and then had the opportunity to join USAID several years after that. And so once I was there, I really jumped in and fell further in love with that type of work and kind of saw myself being there forever until we were shut down last year. And so I had to really sort of rethink my career and my path as it stands, and said, why not try something new? And that's how I ended up working, starting my business, First Light Coffee. And then several months later, I started First Light Media to sort of get back to my media roots, where I'm working to help nonprofits and small businesses tell their stories, which I've enjoyed doing so much in starting my coffee business. And then I feel like I'm a storyteller at heart. So I've been focusing a lot of my sort of writing side of me on Sunrise Dispatch, which has been a wonderful and unexpected outlet for, sharing myself and sharing my stories and sort of processing a lot that has happened in the past several years.
That is a great segue into why I am so incredibly in awe of you and how you have pivoted from working in humanitarian assistance and at USAID to start First Light Coffee and First Light Media and to write and demonstrate that transparency on Sunrise Dispatch. So one of the things when we first started talking is life is not linear, and we have so many different pockets, which you just spoke about, your family, and one on the way, a little new Leverich. I'm so excited. Congratulations.
Thank you. I know, we're so excited. Yes. Don't know what's ahead of us, but yes.
But it will be filled with joy and opportunity, which is the good thing, joy and abundance. So, when we first discussed, one of the things that you did mention was that you'd had a traumatic experience. You'd had a miscarriage almost immediately prior to everything that happened at USAID. And you had to really process that emotion and process losing your job and your dream job at that. What were some of the thoughts that were going through your head when you were trying to figure out how to mesh those two realities together and then still look at that and say, but I'm going to create a better future for myself and my family in starting this endeavor and betting on myself?
Yeah, I think, looking back, this time last year, I would say is one of the most challenging periods of time of my life. Just, I had a miscarriage in December and ended up in the hospital. It was incredibly emotional and traumatic in all the ways you'd expect, but also, it was very difficult in a way that I didn't imagine and quite scary. And then, the new administration took over in January and we started to see people get let go from USAID. And then it became very clear within several weeks that that we would be shutting down as an agency. And so that also, was very sort of traumatic in a different way. So it was just this crazy time of tumult and change that I didn't expect. Yeah, I loved my job. I loved my team. I loved the work. And even on the days where it felt very hard, I'd always walk away feeling very inspired. And that in itself really just made it like the best job ever. So then you're like, how do you replace that, with something new? But because the time was so tumultuous and I was sort of thinking about how to care for myself and, and also my family. And honestly, quite frankly, my miscarriage really scared me. And I was thinking about all the things that I had in my mind that I said, like, I want to do this one day, but like one day I will. Like one day I'll start a business, and one day I will, start writing in a public way. And all of these things that I kept saying, like, were one day things, were suddenly like, well, that was very scary. Like, I don't, you kind of never know what's going to happen. And so I was like, now is the time to sort of try things. And I was forced into this position because of the closure of USAID. I was forced in this position of having to figure out what's next in a way that sort of like there was a fresh slate, because not only did USAID close, but many of the partners that USAID supported were doing mass layoffs as well because they no longer had their funding. So it wasn't just like losing one job and go finding another job in the same industry. It was sort of taking a step back and saying, okay, what else do I want to do right now? Even if that means I'll go back later and do those things that I love so much again, when hopefully USAID or an agency in a similar form comes back one day, I would, that's something I would always love to explore. But in this moment, it was sort of what else can I do or can I try? Knowing that it very well possibly could not work, but now is the only time I'm really going to be given to have, this sort of opportunity, if we can call it that, to try something for myself.
And that's one thing that I don't know that many of our listeners know, and that is with the closure of USAID, yes, some activities moved over to State Department, but for the most part, the international development and humanitarian sector were very much impacted. The sector, although not completely gone, has definitely reduced significantly. And it's not like the jobs just moved. The jobs no longer exist. So it is a moment of reinvention. It is a moment of bravery for so many people out there. And not just, again, as you said, Annie, not just USAID staff, but also anyone who is working in the international development or humanitarian sectors. So with that said, I would like to say that you have faced this and you've bet on yourself and you are using this moment as an opportunity. And I saw you kind of hesitate to say opportunity because it was so hard. It still is so hard.
It doesn't.
Processing
opportunity
it
feels like such a positive word,
thing.
right? And it's like, I wouldn't actually think of it as it's not a positive thing because I never, none of us wanted this to happen.
Yes.
And it's like, how do we make the most of the moment that we're in?
That's it. How do we make the most of the moment that we are in? And you chose to bet on yourself. You chose to chase joy. You chose to look at the world in abundance and know that good things are going to come and may not be in the most obvious place at this point in time. Let's just be honest, but it is there for us. So tell me about your journey to coffee and media. I think the media connection is more obvious due to your comms background, but coffee, why coffee?
I know it seems crazy, right? Like I honestly, I come to this as I started first like coffee as a coffee lover more than anything. I often say I go to bed at night excited to wake up in the morning and have my cup of coffee. So it's really just I've come to this as a coffee lover, and I'm sort of was betting on the fact that maybe being someone outside this industry could be a benefit to me because I'm looking at this more as a customer than a business person. But I've always said that the dream is to start a coffee shop one day, have a coffee company. And when I was sort of thinking about what to do next, I was like, well, I've always said I wanted to have a coffee company. And it was like, let's try it. Why not? So that's what happened. And it's been one of these things where it's like, I just started. I was like, okay, so how do you start a coffee company? Okay. We've got an LLC. Okay. We did that. Okay. I guess you need to roast the beans. Okay. How do I work with people to roast beans? It has been because I am sort of an outsider in this particular sector, it's been so much learning on the fly and trying things and then not knowing, being like, okay, that actually, I wasted an entire day on this thing that doesn't matter at all. And then also thinking something is going to be a lot simpler than it is. So it's been an incredible learning experience. I always have coffee in my house, which is really exciting. I mean, it's also just I have been amazed at the support of people in sort of my network and in the community more broadly. Being an outsider in this, coffee companies and coffee shops are kind of a dime a dozen. There's so many. And so it's why would somebody buy coffee from me versus somebody else? And I've been so lucky because there's been so many people in my life who have no questions asked are just going to, buy coffee from me. But it was also a lot of thinking about how to differentiate myself from all of the other coffee companies out there who are making great cups of coffee and roasting great beans. And I was lucky to find a roaster that I really, really like, roast wonderful coffee, but it's how to differentiate myself. So for me, that thing was trying to tie it to my sort of guiding ethos and previous work. And that I really want to find ways in my life to give back to the broader community. So I said from day one, I'm going to give 5% of my profits to organizations in my community giving back. So I focused primarily on food assistance efforts. So I've given to World Central Kitchen and the Maryland Food Bank. But, I wanted to start that from the very beginning. One, because it's so important to me to work somewhere that is contributing to the world in some way and be somewhere that contributes in some way. But also if I didn't say it from day one, where I had no money coming in, then I knew it was going to be harder and harder as time went on to start when I get to X threshold, then I will start giving back money. So if I start from day one, then even if it means I'm giving $1, then that is something that I'm giving back.
So you've heard it here first, listeners. 2 reasons that you should all order from the link that is provided in the show notes. First Light Coffee is that number 1, first and foremost. It is delicious. I had my 2 large cups of coffee. So good. It's part of my coffee ritual most mornings. So order First Light Coffee. There's also a discount code that is available in the show notes as well. Also, second thing is that Annie, really believes in giving back. And as you said, Annie, you wanted it to be part of your first day, of your first actions, right? There are so many people when profits are low who are not thinking about others. They are thinking about, well, I need to reinvest everything into my business, or I'm not making any money, so I need to take as much money from it as I can. But that wasn't you. That isn't you. Who you are is the person who said, I'm going to start doing this day one because this is a core belief of mine. This is who I am. And I believe I've done what I can to help. And even big companies don't do that. So many of us today want to make sure that where we are spending our money is a place that we believe in and a place that we believe to be at least a little bit altruistic. So support First Light Coffee. It's delicious and it gives back to the community. So one thing I wanted to touch on is something that you said when we first met, and that was there can be no shame in reinvention. So if you could talk about how that transition from being an observer of things that are happening, an observer and storyteller of the wonderful work that USAID did, to being an entrepreneur, where instead of observing, you're on the front lines saying, hey, this is me. Hi, I'm awesome. Support me, buy my coffee, come to me for media. It's quite a pivot, as they would say. So if you could just share something about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think pivoting into something totally new is very scary, and it's very vulnerable because you do so much of it is you have to put yourself out there. Like my strongest desire when I first started First Light Coffee is to just put my website and then not say anything about it because I just want people out there to find it. But that's just not how the world
Magically,
yeah.
they are just going to find it because they're going to be like, Annie's awesome. I have a feeling.
Right.
I have a feeling inside.
Yes. Yeah, but that's just not how the world works. And so it's I had to put myself out there. And that is, very scary and very hard. And I mean, people have been so kind, and, people in the coffee industry have been, very kind to meet with me and talk to me and work with me and give me advice. And then, obviously people in my larger network have been so kind, but so much of it was putting myself out there. Same with writing on Substack, same with working on, media projects. Again, it's just putting yourself out there and reaching out to people, and maybe they're going to say no to you, or, they're going to be like, why are you doing this? And you have to kind of be ready to answer. But I think for me, especially in moments when, maybe it's not clicking and you're not immediately making a bunch of money, and, you haven't built this big network in your new industry yet, and people aren't jumping in the door. It's easy to feel a lot of shame around that because you're like, what am I doing wrong? But the truth is, it's nothing. You're not doing anything wrong. It's that just all these things take time. There are unicorns that take off and you can't explain it, but that is not how business works, how growth works. And there's no shame in that, and if there's moments where you think something is going to be the thing that sort of sets you ahead and ends up not being that, there's no shame in adjusting how you do things or pivoting again or, trying new things. And I know for me, as going from someone who started a coffee business and then thinking well, I actually really miss my previous career too. So how do I add in some media things? I felt like I had to explain myself and saying, well, I want to do this other thing too. But really it's, I don't know anyone an explanation. It's all about sort of what makes me happy, what brings me joy, and also what can help support my family. But also like where can I find ways in the world to add my piece to it? But there's no shame in taking time to do that. And the first try is not necessarily ever going to be the right try. It takes a lot of trial and error. That's what I tell my kids all the time, that they're like, how do I become, my daughter's really into like, how do I get good at this? I'm like, well, you have to practice. It's like, it doesn't just happen. Like I have to remind myself that as an adult.
You cannot tell my 4-year-old that she has to practice anything. As far as she's concerned, she is the best swimmer. I signed her up for snowboard lessons. She was like, I don't need lessons. I can already do that. I'm like, but how? I was like, how about skateboarding? She's like, oh yeah, I'm good at that too. I'm like, you haven't even been on your skateboard. What are you talking about?
I know, and it's like, but it's like such a lesson in just like being a person too. Is like, because my daughter will be like, I wanted to win that, and I'm like, well, like you didn't win, but if you practice, like you will win. And it's just like I have to think of that for myself too, where I'm like, all right, that wasn't the best day, but like if I do it again and just keep moving forward, then like you get incrementally better at running a business or riding a skateboard or whatever every single day. And I think it's just like sort of this, it's really a lesson in perseverance and resilience that I think can apply to pretty much anything. But for me has been, I think for the business is, everything's not going to be perfect, but we just keep moving forward. We just keep adjusting.
So one thing I'm hearing you say, Annie, is that there can also not be shame in failure, because there are small parts or big parts that are not going to go according to plan, and you're gonna fail. No one is good at everything the first time they try it. But that is where bravery and courage come in, right? It's knowing that you may waste a day or longer doing something that you don't need to do, or that when you try something, it's not going to work. But that is counterintuitive to who we are as humans. Most people aren't like, oh, the part I really like about doing something is falling down 5 million times. No, we enjoy being good at things, but bravery is, again, it's about the journey and not the destination. It's about taking those steps and realizing that you have to practice. You have to put in time. You have to be willing to fail, and sometimes fail in the most like public, terrible ways, but that you can pick yourself up and you can continue on. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. It's just, sometimes I'll like say to my husband at the end of the day, I'm like, I just need a win. Because it's not like, going to your, your job where it's like, you're typically, you'd go and you have something you're working on, a project, and you finish it and it goes out and you move to the next thing. It's always churning. Like there's always something, and you always want to be better. And so I feel like it's just, it's human nature to just like, you want to be better and do better and, optimize in some way. And it's, there's no shame in not being perfect.
Yes, there's no shame in not being perfect. That's the hardest thing to remember. Okay, well, this is a great segue again into talking about Sunrise Dispatch and First Light Media. So I know that when I first started reading Sunrise Dispatch, I was like, who is this Annie Leverich? She is the most amazing human being. I want to be her friend. She seems so cool. I feel like I know her, even though I'm just reading her blogs. I feel like we're already BFFs. So what inspired you to write Sunrise Dispatch? And you've touched a bit on, why you started First Light Media, but how are you tying all of this together, and what has been the inspiration for continuing your storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I really think of myself, like I said, my background's in communications. And so I really think of myself as a storyteller. Yeah, I feel like that's sort of been my guiding force in so much of my career so far, is like my desire to tell a story. And then when I started, First Light Coffee, I felt like I had a lot going on. And I was really enjoying sharing my story with people who like I shared it with on like, a personal basis. But I was looking for sort of an outlet to tell that story to other people. And I think also to sort of process some of my thoughts about what was going on in my own life as a mother and a business owner and a person, and, just sort of put it all together. So for me, it was a way for me to sort of just kind of lay out, like, here's, the very messy parts of starting a business as just like a real person. Like, this is not my entire life. Being a mom is really the bigger part of my life. But sharing that's like, okay, I have this, part of my life that's a mom, a wife. I am starting a business. So how do I combine those things? And, it ended up being just a really wonderful creative outlet for me to sort of, share my thoughts and, my insights and things like that as a complete non-expert figuring it out. My whole career until now has been telling other people's stories. I told organization stories or, staff member stories or, beneficiaries of aid, their stories, but I've never really talked about myself in a way that I have in the past year, which has been a total shift for me. And Sunrise Dispatch has been a big part of that because I can sort of put it all down on paper. So it's been like this wonderfully cathartic place to sort of use as an outlet.
And the vulnerability that you demonstrate in all of your writing, the sharing of yourself, I sometimes feel like you almost bare your soul a little bit in the writing. Your voice is so authentic, and that gives it a power. And all the things that I felt, I am not the only person who felt that way when reading. So yes, so I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and being so brave in that writing, but you also share your days full of joy. So it's a good balance. It's a good balance, Annie.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It is, I feel like it's one of these things too, where I don't have an editor. Like, nobody's like looking over my shoulder anymore. It's like there are sometimes I'll send it to my husband in advance and be like, should I stop? Especially I feel like in the world right now, there are a lot of news stories that really like pull at my heartstrings as a mother. And I'll sometimes start writing and I will just like, be like, this is probably too much. And I'll send it to my husband and he'll be like, you might want to like, give yourself a little edit. But even just like the writing it down is cathartic in so many ways.
But so it's almost like your diary, but you share it with the world.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was young, I had a diary and I had two younger sisters. And anytime they got their hands on it, I was like, no, I had like 3 locks on it because I didn't want to share any of my thoughts. Yet you are putting it out for the world to see, which again, in and of itself has its power. You can always take a step back. It's a two-way door. You can always take a step back.
Exactly. I know we talked about this before where it's you have one-way doors and two-way doors. It's everything is the one-way doors are the really big, scary ones. And there's not that many of those where
not that many.
Once you're in, you can't turn around, but the two-way doors are always, you can go either way. So,
and even if you go through the door and it's great, but you still want to take a step back, you can, because we can all adjust. We can all be flexible and agile, and we can all make the decision that's best for us in that moment, because the decision that is best for me today is not necessarily the decision that's going to be best for me tomorrow, nor was it the decision that was best for me, a year ago. So we all just have to accept where we are in the moment and move forward with intention and just try. So we've talked a lot about how wonderfully brave and courageous you are. So was there any point when you were doing all of these things that you thought, this may be a bad idea?
Nicole, I think this at least once a day, every single day, where I'm just like, what am I doing? And I feel like it's the most ever-present thought where I'm like, is this a terrible idea that I have started this business? I don't know what I'm doing. And I just feel like that's just in many ways, it's human nature, and just like, the nature of starting something new and putting yourself out there is just wondering, like, should I be doing this? And if I wasn't second guessing myself, I would probably be doing something wrong, because I feel like you need to reflect a little bit on like, how am I doing? It's sort of, it's sort of why you do like performance evaluations at work, where you're like, how do I do? how am I doing? Like, what could I be doing better? But I think all the time, like, should I just go and like look for a job like a normal person and just be done with it? So yeah, I always think what I'm doing is a bad idea, but then something exciting will happen. And I'm like, this is, this is great. Like everything, of course I'm moving in the right direction. And, people are so supportive and like I have all these ideas of things to try. And so even on the days when I think it's a bad idea, I'm nowhere close to like jumping off the cliff and being like, I'm done. This is because there's too much to do. Like there's too much to do. And so at the end of the day where I'm like, what have I done? It's, I also have to remain very proud of what we have accomplished in a short period of time, not having any experience in this world. So yes, I always think it's a bad idea, but I would not change a single thing about deciding to do this at this time.
See, you are like, this may be a bad idea, but I'm going to keep doing it because I'm going to be brave and I'm being courageous. And this is what I have to do to get to where I want to be. And it's going to be scary, but you're going to get there.
And if nothing else, it will be valuable experience. Like,
yes.
If 10 years from now, I'm looking back and I'm like, remember when I had that coffee business? That was so crazy.
At least you did it. You're one of the few people who said, oh, one day if I had time, I would do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So few people actually do that you will be able to take pride and joy in the fact that you actually did it. Like, I honestly believe you are going to continue being even more hugely successful. And it's going to be more like, oh, remember when I thought that was a bad idea, but I suffered through the hard part?
I like that framing much better. Yes.
Yeah. And now look at us now. So now we are going to get to the point that is really exciting. And that is, what do you believe your bravest moment has been throughout your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I would say that my bravest moment has really been starting this business. I could say pretty unequivocally, I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of leaped into it. But, thinking about this question, I think that brave moments can sort of be broken down in so many ways where, there's a lot of moments in your life that you wouldn't necessarily characterize as brave, but are brave in so many ways. So like, going away to college, like I remember my mom dropping me off and being like, a decision to get married or have kids or join a new social group or something. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many brave things we have to do every day that seems like they're so part of just our everyday lives. But had I not made those little decisions that are ultimately end up being big decisions and been brave in those small ways, I wouldn't have gotten to this point where I have this moment of being brave in this big way.
And that is, it's all of our lives. Every single person's life is built off of small, brave moments. And then we get to a point that all those small, brave moments that we sometimes weren't even cognizant of lead us to have the ability to make these hard choices because we've been building up to this moment. And I often feel like I've been building up to this moment my whole life. So this is a pinnacle point in your time, Annie, and in your life. But as you said, it's about going away to school and having to learn how to adult and be on your own and not being able to go home as easily. It's about getting in your car and just moving away for the first time. It's about making a decision to spend, at least you hope, the rest of your life with someone. It's about making the decision to bring little people into this world and realize that they are solely your responsibility with no instructions. I mean, everyone has a lot of thoughts, but those aren't always helpful. So, it's about that. So last question for you, Annie, is if you were to advise others on how to take that leap off the cliff, how to take that plunge, what would you tell them?
Just leap, just do it. You have to just start. I think, and for me, I'm such a planner that I have oftentimes gotten sort of bogged down in the planning to do the thing, and then you never do the thing. And I think that when you're starting something, that can happen where you get caught up and you end up not making it to the trying part because you're so focused on the, preparing to try part. So, why not try, just jump in, start it. And again, like I was saying before, like your first idea doesn't have to be like the idea that leads you through the rest of your business or the rest of your life or the rest of your, current endeavor. You can start something and then you can go back and assess how it's working and, make adjustments and then, begin again or, adjust accordingly and go from there. But we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to like make it right now. And, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start it. So just start.
The first step is to just actually take the step.
No one knows what they're doing.
And anyone who says that they know what they're doing, they may not be being honest with you.
Yes.
or themselves. I actually find solace in the fact that I most days have no idea what I'm doing.
Yes.
And I'm making it up as I go. But here we are. Podcast on. Well, Annie, thank you so much for being my first ever guest on This May Be a Bad Idea. I'm so excited that you have come and spent this time. And I am so honored that you said yes. And big heart symbol to Annie. This is audio, so you can't see me, but I'm making a big heart sign because I heart Annie. But thank you again so much. Thank you, listeners, for joining us in the first step of this brave journey on This May Be a Bad Idea. Please do listen to the next episode, leave a review, send it to your friends, family, frenemies, and we will see you on the next episode.